Hey, friends, I'm excited about this lesson today. We're going to talk about goals. We're going to do a lot of things. We're going to talk about defining a lot of these words that you hear in fitness, like cut and build and bulk and body recomp. Because a lot of people are like, I don't know what those are. I just kind of have an idea in my mind of what my goals are. So we're going to really dive deep into this and we're going to review what those are. We're actually going to talk not in super detail, but we're going to talk about what they entail so that you kind of get an idea of the direction that you want to go, okay? So, do you always feel like you're spinning your wheels? A lot of women that hire me, they're kind of like, I have a general idea of what I want to do, what I need to do, but I have this fear that maybe it's wrong, or maybe they don't fully understand what their goals entail. So we're going to be defining fat loss phase, or oftentimes people will call it a cut or a diet. Those all mean the same thing. A build phase or a bulk. Sometimes people use those interchangeably. Body recomp. We're gonna define and dive into these. But I also really want to talk about a few other things. I want to talk about the scale and body fat percentage just lightly. And then when women hire me, sometimes they'll say things like they'll send me pictures of women from Instagram and they'll say, I want to look like her. So we're going to talk about that. And I'm really excited to talk about that because I think we can learn a lot together about why I think we all kind of have this idea of that's not the wisest thing to do, but let's dive into why it's not the wisest thing. Now, before I go in to talk about fat loss phases and builds and body recomp, well, just know that we're going to be talking in far more detail about how to do each phase in other lessons. Today, we're just kind of giving you an overview of what they are and what they require from you. But before we dive into that, I want to talk about a topic that I find really, really important. If you have followed me on Instagram for a while, you know that I believe that health is for everyone, but fitness is not. So let's define what health is. When I think of health, I think of somebody who wants to get into a healthy body fat percentage. They want to learn new healthy ways to navigate food, to create a healthy food culture within their home. Um, they want to learn ways to make their body really, really healthy. Or maybe they have activities that they already love that they just want to do better, right? So they maybe biking or running or Pilates or yoga or hiking. They just want to live a healthy life of being mindful about what they're bringing into their body, being mindful with what they're doing with their body so that they can just establish this life of health, right? Now, that I 100% believe is for everybody. And sometimes people, in order to get there, will need to drop some body fat so that they can be in a really good place, in a healthy body fat percentage. Maybe we need to fine tune some things with training so that they can become metabolically healthy or whatnot, on a cellular level. Maybe there are some things that we need to do as far as weightlifting or food that helps them step into that life of health. So 100% believe that that is for everyone. Now, fitness used to just mean that you could do incredible things. And now we're really into this world of it's not just about what you can do, but people also want to look the part. So I'll have ultra runners hire me and say, I've run all these races but I don't look the part, or aerobic instructors all the time hire me. I'm an aerobic instructor and I'm standing here in front of the class, but I don't look fit. I've never had muscle. So there are these people who come to me with these goals, or some women are just like, I've always wanted to have a six pack. I just want to have a six pack. I want to experience it. But do you know what? As we get into more aesthetic goals, there is a there's we have to be very careful because a lot of times it takes a healthy relationship to your body and to foods, and it takes a mental health piece that sometimes a lot of women don't have. And so for those women, health is key. It is extremely important and it should be sought after. But they think that they're going to find self-love and respect if they look a certain way. And a lot of times red flags can be they can't step on the scale without some type of, panic attack or feeling less worthy or less lovable or less beautiful because the scale has fluctuated. So any increases in the scale and they've just kind of lose themselves a little bit. I'll maybe talk to them about supplements and be like, "Oh, we can do some creatine." And they're, "Oh, no, that will increase water weight." I'm like, "Well, but that's water weight. Why is that an issue?" To me, that's not an issue. But as me as a coach, that is a huge red flag that that person mentally, emotionally are not at a point when they should be concerning themselves with aesthetic goals. I truly believe that. I've helped hundreds of women find health, find fitness. And in the process, I've encouraged some women in health, like, hey, if you have a really healthy mind about this game, if you ever wanted to do something more, oh yeah, I would love to. Okay, then let's do it. Or on the other side of the spectrum, I've had women come to me saying, I want a six pack, I want this, I want that. And after working with them, I strongly encourage them, you know, there's an element of mental health and emotional health and self-respect and love that is not there yet for fitness to be your number one priority. So I actually think we would do better to step into health and really refine and work through some of those other issues. And if we can, then we can move back into this sweet spot where now we have health and we can work on some fitness. But in fitness, as you're about to see as we go through this process, you're about to see that some people have goals that they will be going into periods of putting on muscle plus body fat. The scale's going to be going up, scale's going to be going down. And if they are not emotionally ready to cope with that, then it can send them in a very, very negative place. And as a coach, I feel like I have a responsibility to be able to spot that and to be able to call it out when I see it. And so I just really have to encourage everybody to take responsibility for where they're at, where their mind's at, and just realize that sweet spot that I'm kind of showing here, health and fitness, that might not, well, let me put it this way. We kind of get to define what our sweet spot is and what's health and what fitness is for us, right? If we let other people define it, then we're always going to be chasing things on other people's terms. But there are some women who I've worked with and they finally found this sweet spot of health and fitness. And the sweet spot was actually them letting go of original goals they had because they realized I actually don't want to restrict myself so much that I have a six pack. I'm going to let go of that. And I'm going to let go of that idea that if I attain that, then I'm fit. And I'm creating my own sweet spot of I'm going to be strong in the gym. I'm going to lift weights and feel so powerful. And I'm going to treat my body with love and respect. And they find their own sweet spot. And a lot of times it's not what they originally came into with that goal. But as they realize what the process oftentimes requires, they realize that they need to shift their own expectations because they actually don't want to put in all of that effort. And that's okay. That is so fine. Um, there is a beautiful thing that happens when somebody can create that their own sweet spot of what health and fitness is and not define it by somebody else's body or on somebody else's terms. So that is what I want everybody here to figure out. Like, what are they willing to, what are their goals? Realistically, what are they willing to give? And you may find in the course of this nutrition program that you realize, that's not my goal because now that I know what it requires, I don't want to do it. And there will be slight differences in requirements depending on the person. But I just feel like this is really important. There's a lot of people out there with a six pack that they are in the fitness circle and they're not healthy. They are not healthy. And they show up every day on Instagram and they're, look at me, look at my booty pose, look at me flexing. And they are missing a huge mental health piece. And so oftentimes we get that confused. We see six packs and we think, oh, they're healthy. There's a lot of people with six packs that aren't healthy. Likewise, there's a lot of healthy people who don't have six packs, right? Now, sometimes we can find that sweet spot though, but once again, we define it, not other people. I think that that's really important to kind of start this discussion out with is that every single goal is so different. Every single body is so different. And you may find that it's just going to require a lot of you that you realize you're not up for that game. So let's dive into this. Let's start with fat loss because that's what everybody talks about, right? So we're going to move into talking about fat loss. What does fat loss mean? A lot of times you'll hear people say a cut. I'm in a cut. This is a fat loss phase. They'll say I'm in a cut or I'm in a diet. And usually what they're saying is they're in a fat loss phase. Their main focus during this phase, this is very important to understand these main focuses of different phases. The main focus is to see body fat come down and just to maintain minimal muscle amounts. Like they want to maintain the muscle that they have and they just want to see body fat come down. Now, how do you do this? Once again, we're going to talk about this in much more detail in other lessons going forward. But how do we do this? Well, basics are we get into a calorie deficit, right? We eat less and we expend more energy. So lifting for this type of phase is a minimum of 3 times a week because we are trying to maintain muscle mass, remember? So it's actually not smart to do a calorie deficit and only cardio or no working out at all. Because if you do that, doesn't matter how much protein you eat, you will drop muscle tissue. So just an interesting fact, if you do a fat loss phase, but you don't couple it with really changing your lifestyle, 80% of people who just do fat loss phases, who, do random new diets that come out and they don't really change their food culture and change their lifestyle. 80% of those people put on the weight back plus more. So think about that. If the person lost 25 pounds and a good portion of that is also muscle tissue because they were just in a calorie deficit and they weren't lifting weights, then when they put 25 pounds back on, they're still not going to be lifting weights. So they are now replacing that muscle tissue with fat. So they're actually in a worse position, even though they've just put the same amount of weight on because they've replaced that. They've lost muscle tissue, replaced it with body fat. So they're actually in a worse position. So it's very important, even if your goal is just fat loss. One, let's stop with the yo-yo dieting. Let's change the food culture and the lifestyle that we have. Two, man, you do everything you can to keep that muscle tissue. Okay. Now I'm showing this adorable girl. She's so cute. Oh my goodness. And I just love to see how excited she is. You can tell it in her face. She's so excited. She's so proud of herself. You guys, a lot of times it's not actually about losing the body fat. And if you've heard me on a few podcasts, you've heard this before. It's actually that she made promises and she's keeping them and she's doing hard things. And that makes you step into your integrity a bit more. And you just see she's proud of her hard work and she's excited. Whether she's doing this or running like a marathon, it doesn't matter. She's putting in hard work and she should be celebrated for that hard work. But, anyways, you can tell, like, if you look at the before and then you look down here at the 6 months, you can tell she hasn't put on, muscle tissue really. She's just kind of minimally, like, preserved her muscle tissue, which isn't, like I said, good or bad. It's just her goal. If her goal was to just lose body fat and keep minimal amounts of muscle tissue, she achieved her goal. And some people, that's their goal. I don't care what anybody's goal is. I just want you to feel successful in your goal. So that's why we're breaking down what each of these phases mean and what they require of you. So I'm not going to say one goal is better than another. Who am I to say that? It comes down to the individual and what they want. And I know a lot of women who come to me and they're like, I just want fat loss. And they're like, well, why are you having me lift weights? Well, because you need to keep that minimal amount of muscle tissue for overall health. And then also when you do reverse, you want to be eating more, right? That muscle tissue is going to play a huge role in that. Now, if I experienced something similar, I was lifting weights and I dropped. Now, this picture on the left here, that was actually after I dropped 30 pounds. After Hazel was born, everybody told me it'll just fall off. Well, it wasn't. It was like 3 months later and it wasn't just falling off. And so I had to get into a calorie deficit. For like the first time in my life, I had to really pay attention to food. I had 3 bulging discs in my low back, so I couldn't do cardio anymore. Any pounding just really aggravated it. So all I could really do was upper body lifting for a year. So anyways, I dropped 30 pounds and then I took this picture. That picture was at 119 pounds, guys. I'm like 123 pounds right now. So it's crazy to me to look at that picture and see how much body fat I had on. And then I dropped another like 9 pounds and I was at 100 pounds or, oh my goodness, that was not 100 pounds. That's supposed to say 110. I was at 110 pounds. And for me, that's like 110, like I'm 5'7.5". I felt like I should weigh more. And then I was also like, I was proud of myself, but I also remember looking in the mirror and I was really falling in love with lifting weights. And I remember thinking, I thought I would have more muscle. I thought there would be more to me. I thought I would look fit. So I was really disappointed when I found out that, oh, my genetics are just that I don't have muscle. I was so frustrated by that. So it took years for me to increase and really change my body. And here I am at 116 pounds, making huge changes in my body. But that took a few years going from this to then, I don't know, where did that go? There we go. To putting all that muscle tissue on. Like you can see, my arms are completely different. My waist is cinched up even more. It kind of sucked because my legs, like I couldn't work on them with anything for a year. I remember trying to a little bit and it would put my back out. So that was pretty rough. And a lot of people ask me, I'll go into more detail another time about what I did, but pretty much, guys, I spent so much money on physical therapists and nobody could help. I finally just stopped for a year. It just stopped everything that made it hurt. And then I slowly started adding stuff back in. Also, learning how to lift weights with good form was huge. So there's that. Going back to this fat loss phase, though, let's talk about the pros and cons because every single phase is going to come with pros and cons. So the pros of fat loss phase, it's fun seeing the fat come off. It's fun getting leaner, fitting better into pants. It's easier than any other phase as far as tracking progress, right? Pants are fitting better, awesome. The scale is going down, measurements are going down. It is a lot easier to measure that progress. And then you're probably going to hate me for saying this, but progress actually for fat loss phases, for cuts, they progress moves faster in fat loss than any other phase. So what I mean by that is it's easier to drop body fat than it is to put muscle on. So this is going to be one of the easier phases. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. The mental piece that is required, because as we go into the cons of it, it's mentally taxing to focus on restriction. People don't realize that calorie deficits are actually a stress on the body, which is why we don't spend excessive amounts of time in them. And then it's just mentally taxing to weigh, measure food. Now, I'm not saying you have to weigh or measure food to see fat loss, but usually people can make minimal changes to their lifestyle and then their hormones kind of shift. And it gets harder to stay in a calorie deficit if you're not somehow using some kind of restriction or measurement to push yourself into a calorie deficit. So the next phase is a building muscle phase. People will call it a build. People will call it a bulk. For some reason, I'm not a huge fan of that phrase bulk. So I usually call it a build phase. Now, the main focus of this phase is to build muscle. So how do you do it? You get into a calorie surplus and then you lift 4 times a week. You might be able to get away with 3, but when you start going into builds, like you need enough frequency. 4 times is probably is going to be better. 5 times, you could get away with that if you were a newbie. I know for a few years I lifted 5 to 6 times a week, but I also plateaued. And I had to pull back. And by pulling back on my training and increasing my food, it helped me get past that plateau of building muscle. So during this time, you really need to focus on hypertrophy work and progressive overload. So going into the gym with a program in hand that is a hypertrophy program, not a bouncy. There's some popular programs out there that are like all circuit stuff, minimal rest periods, a lot of burnouts, and that's not hypertrophy work. So although those things, you can get away with those things during a cut, that is not what you want to be doing during a build, okay? So no bouncy lifting here, okay? And then you want to be limiting cardio. Use cardio wisely. Cardio is a tool. If you think about building a house, I like using this analogy when I talk about building muscle and building phases because it's really important. The body needs supplies to be able to build muscle, which is why you go into a calorie surplus. It needs extra supplies to actually put that towards building muscle. So let's say you wanted to build a house. Showing up at the lot, that's the gym, showing up at the lot and just running around the lot after a few weeks going to be like, well, where's my house? Well, you don't have any supplies, but I'm going to the lot. I'm working, but you don't have supplies. So it doesn't matter if you go to the lot and run around all the time. If you don't have the supplies, you're not going to build the house. And it's the same thing with building muscle. Just going to the gym isn't good enough. Just lifting a dumbbell isn't good enough. You need to have the supplies, and then you need to be working on progressive overload. And a lot of times in this scenario of building a house, I think sometimes that women think that cardio is like a hammer. When you don't know much about tools, you kind of think that a hammer can do everything, but it can't. A hammer, when it's used on certain items, it can ruin it. And I think that about cardio, that it is an amazing, great tool. And I love cardio, but we can overuse it, overplay it a lot. And in a building muscle phase, that's one of those time periods where it's like, don't overly use this. Sure, you want to stay somewhat cardiovascularly fit, but don't play that card too much. Use it for what it's meant for. So that's kind of about the building muscle. Now, I want to show you this. Now, a lot of times when people look at this picture, the left picture was me trying to keep that six pack, trying to stay too lean, but I'm also trying to build muscle at the same time, but it just wasn't working. So I had to finally let that go. I started eating to fuel my lifts and body. And I think what people think is they look at that left picture and they think, oh, well, she just started eating more and her stomach stayed flat and she just put on muscle on her butt. Awesome. Like, I want to do that. But that's actually not what it looked like. Like, there was this in between phase where my waist was now 3 inches bigger and I was wearing sweatpants a lot. And I had to buy new jeans that actually like fit around my waist because I was 10 pounds heavier and it was hard. And it was hard. So oftentimes people forget about that. That's the You look at an iceberg, they only see the tip, they don't see what's underneath, what the hard work that I had to push into mentally being quite uncomfortable, being 10 to 13 pounds heavier at one point. So the pros of this building phase is we really do see large changes in muscle development. Now, these phases are usually like 6 to 12 months, but we're going to see some nice muscle development. You can enjoy eating a lot more and you can loosely track. You don't have to be weighing literally everything. A lot of my clients that go into building phases, they'll say to me, like, oh, I went out to eat 2 to 3 times this week and I don't really care. I'm like, sure, whatever. Did you use those extra calories? Like, push yourself really hard in the gym? I don't really care. Because the whole point is we want a surplus. Now, an excessive crazy surplus, obviously, the person just needs to realize they're going to put on a little bit more body fat. So maybe it's not in their interest to go super, super crazy, but to be loosely tracking a lot more, that can be kind of a nice break. So another pro is that you feel really, really strong in the gym. And I love that. And I should have added another pro into this one. And that is, I actually think that building muscle phases, although mentally, like if you look at the cons, the very last one, building takes time. You'll feel very fluffy and full a lot. The mental piece this creates for women can be very, very challenging. But those clients that I've helped push into a build that have finally embraced the build and been like, I'm fluffy and I'm okay. I'm building muscle. When they finally embrace it, it can be like that mental cure that they needed for their obsession with being so lean all the time. So a lot of women, although they fear this building phase, this bulk or whatever, a lot of times when they finally embrace it, they actually find that mentally and emotionally, they've never been so healthy with their body before. And they just embrace the strength. And that is a pro. That should be number one. That is incredible to watch women go from restriction to thriving in a strength and a build phase. It's really cool. It is really, really cool. So the cons to this are, well, body fat increases and that can kind of stink. Even though they're embracing it, it's still like, well, I kind of wish my stomach was leaner, but whatever. So there's that healthy balance. But you just have to accept it. It is what it is. It's hard to measure progress when body fat and muscle are both building at the same time. Sometimes it's hard to measure and you're like, oh, I'm feeling really fluffy. I'm just really hoping that when I cut down, there's a lot more muscle. But here's the thing. If strength is increasing, your muscle's increasing. So that's really what it comes down to. If your lifts in the gym are progressing, then you're putting on muscle. If you're just eating a ton and your lifts aren't progressing at all, well, you need to start pushing yourself more in the gym. Really start challenging your strength more. So now let's talk about body recomp. So if you look at this picture of me when I first started, well, it was like 3 months in. On the left, I was 119 pounds. And you see how large actually my stomach was, right? That's really where I hold a lot in my stomach and my arms. My legs are always like these toothpicks. So that's just kind of, that's my body. We all have these genetic maps that tell your body where to put it on first, where to take it off last. And usually our trouble spots are on the genetic map of body fat. Is the trouble spots are called that because it usually takes a high amount of restriction to pull the body fat off of it, because that's where it comes off last. So that's usually why they call them trouble spots. And no, there's no exercise that can make it come off first. So I know it stinks. Pinterest, Instagram, it's all lying to us saying that we can spot reduce when we can't. So people are always like, I know I can't spot reduce, but what can I do about the body fat that's under my tricep? And I'm like, that's literally you asking me how to spot reduce it. You're telling me I know I can't, but really between me and you, it's like, no, 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 no. Even when you phrase it like that, no, there's no exercise to go there that's going to zap it. So it's kind of funny. But anyway, so let me go back. I digress. I'm sorry. So body recomp. So when we're looking at this picture on the left, I'm 119 pounds, very different than on the right when I'm 129 pounds, 10 pounds heavier, and look just a little different, right? So this is where in body recomp, we really can't focus on the scale here. The scale is just, it's not going to be the end all, right? So there's so much going on in the body, and we do have to let that scale fluctuate. So oftentimes when people are referring to body recomp, they're talking about either the method of staying at maintenance and working on hypertrophy and hoping they're putting on muscle and dropping body fat at the same time, or what they're referring to is over a long period of time, them actually cycling through builds and cuts and builds and cuts to kind of land at what you see me at right over here on the right. So when somebody says body recomp, they can mean one of two things. Either they are staying at maintenance and focusing on, like I said here, hypertrophy training, progressive overload emphasis, or it could mean that they're cycling through. So sometimes I think people just need to be a little bit more specific or ask more questions around that when they see somebody doing that or talking about body recomp. So let's talk about these two different methods of body recomp. And I'll share my personal opinion through my own experience, through all of the coursework and knowledge that I have in training and nutrition and research. And people often think that this is just my opinion. And I'm like, well, I guess it's my opinion based off of research and such. So let's talk about it. Body recomp, this desire to stay at maintenance calories and work on hypertrophy to increase muscle and drop body fat at the same time. Is this possible? Or even just going into a slight calorie deficit and hoping to get both at the same time. Is this possible? This is more likely with people who are newbies. And I think that's really important to understand. So the more trained you become, the less likely you'll be able to do this, because the more you have to optimize things. And you have to be very knowledgeable with training to be able to optimize in this regard. The pros of this approach would be no fat gains because you're not pushing into a calorie surplus. And a lot of women love that idea. It hits their you can have your cake and eat it too kind of feel. Like I can stay at maintenance or below, get all the muscle I want, plus stay lean. Yes. People might be overselling this a little bit to you. So that's important to understand. Mentally, this works better with a lot of women, especially women who do really, really, really struggle with the scale. And maybe diving into more aggressive fitness approaches are not going to be what's optimal for them. And so that is when I would use this approach. When somebody wants a more moderate approach that emotionally around their food, around body, around the scale, they can't go aggressive. but they're willing to put the time in and over a year, 2 years, 3 years, see the desired changes that they want. You will have to be patient with this approach though. So cons are, well, you're going to have to be patient. And I know few people in fitness that are patient, I swear. It takes a very long time for this approach. So you will have to practice patience. In 3 months, you're not going to see that picture that I just barely showed. You're not going to see that in 3 months. So kind of got to get over that one. And there are hard muscle gainers who will see far less results with this. So I would say, there is something to the ectomorph, to the body typing. And I would say an ectomorph, they are going to see, the newbie lifter type of gains, but then they will have to step into more of the more aggressive approach if they want to see results. So this approach works far better with two kinds of people. One, the newbie, the untrained lifter, and two, women who mentally just can't get aggressive. And there's nothing wrong with that. Know thyself. Choose the path that's going to work best for you. So there's that. Now let's go over the other body recomp approach that's usually over time as well, but we can actually get faster results over time with this approach because we're not just trying to sit in this comfort zone and hope for the best. If you look over here at the right, we're pushing into these phases. So you're going to push into that muscle building phase for 6 to 8 months. I honestly like 8 to 12. That's like my sweet spot. So you'll push into it 6 to 12 months. And then you go down and you diet for 3 months. I'm in middle of a diet. So I just came off of like almost a year building. And now I'm doing a 3 month diet. And I cannot tell you how awesome it is right now. I'm so excited about all the changes that I've seen over this past year. It's really, really, really fun. So anyways, you'll notice that muscle stays about the same. The body fat, we drive it back down, and then we go into a build phase again. We drive the body fat and the muscle up. And then we go into a cut again where we pull down pull back the pieces and see more of the muscle we've built. And over time, you are going to see a bit more changes with this type of approach versus just sitting at maintenance or right below maintenance. So personally, I do prefer when the overarching goal is body recomp. I do prefer this approach. You'll see more changes in less time. Another pro is works well for untrained and trained individuals and everybody in between. It just works better for everybody. The cons, well, it's the same as the cons with the muscle building and the fat loss phase. Like you're going to be pushing into more of extremes. You're going to be pushing into the extreme of eating in a calorie surplus and then eating in a calorie deficit, then eating in a surplus and eating in a calorie deficit. So in pushing into those little bit of extremes, it's uncomfortable. Another con is you've got to be dedicated to this process. There's two types of people who do this. One type is they hate themselves enough to do this. And unfortunately, they think at the end of this, they're going to love themselves. And that's not how it works. And so they just end up getting burnt out and they still have all of their issues they had before because they weren't fixing what internally needed to be fixed. They were thinking that externally fixing things would internally fix things. That's not how life works. Then there are the other people who they do this because they love the process of stretching themselves internally. And then they see these external results. Don't you love that comparison? I love that comparison.